welcome back to Getting to the Top, where I interview transformational leaders about their leadership journey so that we can learn from them about what they've learned on this incredible leadership quest. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Nicola Watson. She leads the City UK's international team, providing unique insight and deep expertise into the markets and trade relationships that underpin the UK's success as a leading global financial center. Prior to joining the City UK, Nicola was the general manager of the Americas for the Australian Trade and Investment Commission and Deputy Consul General in New York, where she managed 5 consulates. She's previously held senior positions across Asia, Europe, Australia, leading international business development for the Australian government. And in her career, she's been a global champion for diversity and inclusion and sponsored an organization's capacity development. She's a regular presenter, as you would imagine, on trade and investment, and is just a uniquely wonderful person who can share with us some interesting perspectives on how she's done what she's done and how she's managed to have this incredible career. Welcome, Nicola. Is there anything else that you'd like to include in your introduction?
Well, look, thank you so much for the chance to be with you today. It really is very humbling. I've been watching your podcast and you've had some truly amazing women leaders on it. And I'm not sure I can live up to all of that, but very happy to share my experience today. I think maybe the one thing that I would add to all of this is really what took me on this journey. When I was quite young, I started to get a real passion for travel and for meeting people from different backgrounds. And it's always been something that fascinated me. I came from a family where we moved often, and I was often, if you like, the stranger in a new town, having to make new friends and get to know what was in, what wasn't in at school. And that led me to a real desire to have that as part of my career. And so I think that's probably one of the things that has really defined me as I've gone through my work, is having 1 or 2 passions that I've really held onto and then tried to find a way to bring them to life as I've taken on different roles.
You know, that's so interesting. And I find that, first starting with, oh, I don't know if I can live up to the expectation of your other guests. And I find that the truly transformational leaders are normally so very humble and so very unassuming. And maybe that creates space for others to sort of fill in and at least have an opportunity to express themselves. And so immediately as you're like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to live up to it, I know that you absolutely are. So you decided that you had this passion as a child for filling new spaces, meeting new people, and traveling. And so how did that sort of manifest itself into the choices that you made that led you on this journey? What were the choices that you made that directed you?
Yeah, I think I never really had a clear understanding of exactly what I wanted to do. So I want to reassure other people listening to this that it's not always important to know exactly what it is you want to do. But if you do have a clear sense of what one of your purposes, what your real why is, what really makes you feel like you're going to deliver value out externally to the community, to the world, and also to yourself, then I think it really helps you to identify those opportunities as they come your way. And so for me, this love of other people, of different environments, manifested itself at school and at university, where I studied a lot of foreign languages. So that really started to give me the opportunity to think in different ways, to understand that how languages are constructed really reflects the culture of the places that they come from. And then from university, I also studied a lot of history. So for me, that was also really important, because if your history defines what you are today and helps to guide you into the future. So I think that was something that also started to make me realize that my own experience, what I was being taught at school, was only one version of history, and that there were many, many different versions of history out there coming from different people from different perspectives. And that then, allowed me to sort of start to think about how I could use that. And to be honest, I wasn't really very business oriented when I was at school or at university. What was fascinating me was the cultural aspects, the historical aspects, the literature, the art. And so it took me a little while to then think about how could I actually turn that into some kind of a career path. And it's actually quite a funny story because after I finished graduating, I was looking around for a job like most of us do. And I had applied for the government. They had like an accelerator program for graduates.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought you got to put down the choices of the departments that you would like to work for. And I didn't really know which one I wanted, but there was one called Foreign Affairs. There was one called Ethnic Affairs and Migration. There was one called like Industry. So I had these three choices, and then I got a phone call saying I'd been invited to an interview. Didn't really pay much attention because I was a student to any of the details. And I thought I was going for an interview with this Department of Ethnic Affairs and Migration. And so I read a lot on Australia's migration policy and different business cultural programs and community engagement. And when I turned up at the interview, it turned out I'd misheard, and I was actually being interviewed by the industry department. And so we had this fascinating but rather concerning moment in the interview where I wasn't very well prepared. Maybe they just thought they were getting a totally blank sheet of paper, but they took me in, and that was how I started out on a career in international business development, and it went on from there.
So it sounds as though, one of the important things for you was not just determining your values, so that you knew what in fact to rule out, but also to sort of define what, without sort of saying, okay, I'm aiming at that specific point, but certainly to say I'm moving in that particular direction because of the value that I have the opportunity to bring, and what's important to me, what are my values, as well as what I think I have the ability to contribute as sort of a pillar in your developing your career, and also a happy accident for turning up for the wrong interview.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, there is a lot of happenstance in our lives, and one of the things I think it's important to do is to embrace those moments and kind of feel that it must be there for a reason in some way, shape or form, and not to resile away from it, but to actually find those moments to embrace it. And a lot of the best things that we come and learn from life are not always from the things that go exactly the right way. It's often the things that go the wrong way that you learn a lot from as well. So I think, taking those opportunities when they do arise and embracing them, which is what I was lucky enough to do when I started out in my career, and say, well, okay, this isn't really what I plan to do as a job, but here I am, let's see what I can make of it. That I think has been very important. And along the journey, when people do reach out to you and offer you the chance to do a project or take on a particular role or participate in something that you really never thought was going to be something that's in your strong suit, sometimes just taking the risk and having a go and taking advantage of those opportunities can open up whole new paths to your career. And I think sometimes, women are a little bit reluctant to do that still. We all know the old sort of messages about the fact that women feel they need to be 100% qualified before they ever take on a particular challenge or ever put themselves forward. I think, we need to learn from the fact that sometimes when these opportunities come our way or we just stumble into something, we shouldn't be too cautious or too risk averse. We should really have a go, and sometimes it's a total failure and we learn from that, but a lot of the time you get these amazing deep experiences and really learn more about yourself and more about how you can contribute in different kinds of ways.
Brilliant advice. So tell me about you. You get into this role in trade. Do you immediately like it? Are you, how do you then get to the next level?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and when I first joined, I was just like any other. I had joined the civil service. We were all eager little bunnies trying to work out how to develop a career path and some expertise. And I think that there was no immediate pathway that I could find. So what I really did start to do is say, well, if international is one of the things that's really passionate for me, if that desire to travel is something that I could really latch onto, and an appreciation of other cultures, how could I turn that into more of a career path? And so I really started to look for those opportunities to work on projects that allowed me to have more exposure in those areas. I talked to my managers at the time about how I might be able to do that. I looked for opportunities to volunteer for things that were coming in, like international events or trade shows, so I could find a bit of a experience in those areas. And then decided that I was going to set targets for myself. I think it's very important on a career journey to stop at quite regularly, at least every few years, and write a little plan for yourself that says, in a perfect world, what would I really like to be doing at the moment? What would I like to achieve in the next 5 years? And at the time I was in Australia, and I thought, I really want to work overseas. I just don't think I'm going to get the experience and the opportunities I want just staying in Australia. So, that was part of my plan. And then I said, well, everything I was doing was, how do I find that opportunity? How do I make myself attractive so that I can win a role internationally? What do I need to do to have in that skill set? And then that enabled me to be able to find that opportunity and to jump off. And that was the start of my international business career. And it really came about through a short-term assignment where I was given the opportunity to go and work overseas for 3 months in one of the government's overseas offices. I took that opportunity, and then while I was there, I applied for and won another job, and then that started it. So sometimes you don't get all the way that you want to get to first, but you have to be willing to take a little bit of a risk and find a clear path of what you really want, not the whole picture. I have to admit, I've never had that. I've never had a whole picture of what I want to do. I've just had ideas of what might be a pathway to fulfillment.
I love that. So, some of the things that we're learning here is that you need to trust the universe and trust the opportunities that come to you because they may be really important. And I think what I want to ask you next is how do you decide? Is it a feeling? Is it intuition? Is it you sort of weigh it against your purpose? How do you decide this is the opportunity that's come to me, that is the one that I should take in this idea that I have for the life that I want, or this is not the one, this is, because you certainly wouldn't have jumped on every opportunity that presented itself. How do you choose?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm not sure there's a perfect solution to this along the way. And we all have to be willing to try different things and sometimes make mistakes. I think for me, what it comes back to at the beginning, as you said, is purpose. So I spend quite a lot of time thinking about, what am I really trying to do here? What really makes me want to get up in the morning? So there's a famous management consultant, Simon Sinek, who talks about your why, find your why. And I think that's a great way to think about it. Most of us know what it is we do. Most of us kind of know how we do it, but not a lot of us know why we do it. What really gives us a sense of fulfillment? So I think having that why at the center and then working out your game plan, your regular kind of reflections, and they're not all work related. There's a whole set of things that you might want to have in that kind of personal plan of yours. And then that allows you to have that as a great filter for deciding whether or not this opportunity aligns. Because it's not just
Mm.
about, is this an overseas opportunity, which was for me one of them, but does it align to my other values? Is it something that is still consistent with the kind of work that I want to be able to do? And is it going to be can I see how it could lead to the next step in the journey?
Mm.
So it's not just one of those things that you do, but you can't really see how it would ever help you to get further. Those are probably the criteria that I use most. You know, is it aligned to my values? Can it act as a stepping stone to something else?
And I love that as well. The setting of the intention, the seeing how not necessarily having a having it fully worked out, and not necessarily waiting until you're completely skilled up to then be willing to take the chance, being willing to sort of venture out of your comfort zone in order to learn a new skill or to gain a new opportunity, as long as it aligns with a path that could be a possible path to something that makes sense for you based on your why and based on your values.
That's right. And it doesn't always have to be linear either. I think, you know, a lot of the time people only take roles where, is this a progression? Is this taking me like climbing up the rungs of a ladder? Sometimes, you know, you have to think, you have to go broad, and you have to go sideways in order to find the path forward that you're looking for. But I think it's also the same in how we lead a team as well. You know, these same principles apply. There's so much change that we have in the world when we're trying to lead people and support others around us. We don't always know what the final destination is. You can look at all these changes going on with digitalization and AI and so on that are really prevalent in the news at the moment. We don't know exactly what that's going to mean, but as leaders, we can help to sort of plot a pathway and help to show people the direction of travel that we're trying to go in and stay aligned to our values as an organization and as a team. And I think bringing some of those principles back into your personal life really helps you to be stronger as well.
You raise an interesting point about leading a team. So, you know, you're going through your career, you're getting these new opportunities. I'm assuming in getting these new opportunities, now you're leading other people. What kind of leader are you?
I think I hope at least that I'm a very open and authentic leader. I think over the time I realized many years ago that I'm just not smart enough to be Machiavellian. I could never, I'd be sitting in rooms and watching these people tying themselves in knots, trying to, you know, master internal politics and really be something that they're not, that's not genuine for them. And it just struck me that was never going to be a successful pathway for me. So I try and just be as open and as honest as I can, and really make sure that I really listen to others. It's been one of my great learnings and journeys as I've worked around the world, that when I come in, I'm always the outsider. I'm always the person who doesn't know how things work. So listening to the local team, listening to the people around you, and honouring the work that's already been done, even if you're coming into a failing team or things that really need to be fixed or turned around or improved, understanding the heritage or the foundations that people have come from, I think is really an important starting point, because only then can you start to find the real strength and then really build up from that. And that goes for new teams as well, being able to harness the expertise of those around you, not be afraid to admit that you don't know something, create space for people to come to you with solutions, with ideas, and be a champion for those. I think I heard, you know, for one of my mentors fairly early on told me, you will always look good as a leader if your people are happy, if they feel really valued, if they're delivering the very best they can. That reflects back onto you. And I think that was quite helpful, because when I started taking on leadership roles when I was, you know, quite young and still learning, that sense about, you know, you had to know the answer, you had to be the one in charge and sort of owning it all, just made it all very tense. And when you realize that leadership is about empowering others and bringing out their best, you can kind of relax a bit, because you've just got everybody else working with you.
And you mentioned, one of your advisors who made this point about, the better your people feel and how they feel valued and the better you look. Do you have a cohort of advisors? How did you happen upon this wonderful advice?
Yeah, and again, one of the women who I really admire told me when she was giving me some early mentoring, you should, she called them 7 rabbis in her world. She said, in my world, I have 7 rabbis, call them what you will, 7 advisors, 7 people to guide you. And really look for those people, because they will be the ones who can really sponsor you and help you along your way. So you don't need to have 7 of them all at once, but they're people that you come across in your pathway and on your journey. And some of them might be friends who can give you that honest advice and really help to pick you up off the floor when you fall down. Others of them might be sort of professional people in your workplace, maybe one of the CEOs or a senior manager who's willing to back you and sponsor you and give you some guidance and advice. It might be colleagues or peers who are in a similar space to you, who you can share those experiences with. So I think, you tend to know them when you find them. But if you can't find them, and as someone who moves, every 3 or 4 years, it's often quite hard to find those people in a short period of time. You can use networks that are out there to help you to do that. So I'm a big believer in belonging to different women's business networks. I find there's a huge amount of strength that I can get from those, and the women are always willing to lean in and help other women on their journey and to share their experiences. So use those kind of networks or other people that you can access to help you to find those mentors and supporters. It really makes such a difference to the way in which you think about your journey. And, when you were saying before, how do you filter opportunities? One of the great ways to do that is to be able to take an opportunity like that and talk it through with one of your mentors. And they'll also give you some feedback that you can take on board. And make sure some of those mentors are also people, who can, if you like, reverse mentor you. So they might be people who are earlier in their career journey than you are, but they also can reflect back on how they see you, how they perceive you. And so it also helps you make sure that you're always new and current and fresh in your thinking. And that makes you, keep your excitement levels and your energy levels going as you pursue all these different career opportunities and deal with some of the difficult times. So definitely one of my top tips is, find your seven mentors and really make an effort to give back in that regard as well.
I love that. I think it's often, people who seek out mentors don't often think that they have anything to give back, or they don't even think about, what am I bringing to the table? What am I bringing to this relationship? And it doesn't always require that you do, but it's certainly always helpful if you have that in mind, so that if that is required, you are ready and you understand, listen, here's the value that I bring to you in this reverse mentoring, having you understand how things are changing. So what does that conversation look like? You've found somebody and you're like, you're it. You're gonna be one of my 7 rabbis. What does that conversation look like?
I think sometimes it can be very intentional, and certainly when I was in New York, there was a particular woman who I just thought was amazing. So I did actually approach her and say, you've been terrific at helping me with some early introductions. I'm new here in the market, but actually I just think I've got so much more to learn from you. Would you be prepared to sort of act as a bit of a mentor for me and be a sounding board when I need to come to you for some help and guidance? So that was, if you like, a more intentional approach. And she was, of course, terrific and very busy woman, very successful, but always found time for a cup of coffee and a chat when I needed it. Other times, I think people almost not find you. So often in the workplace, you may find people are just happy. They just sort of start to support you a bit, they like what they see, and then I think you can do it a little bit more naturally. So I think, you know, those mentoring or sponsor relationships come in different forms. I think one is just having your eyes open to it, and then making sure that you do engage that person in an active way. I think that would be my tip. So do make sure that you are staying in touch with them, that you're keeping them informed about things that you might be doing, keeping them kind of engaged, if you like, and listening to them too, because all, as you said, all relationships should be two-way. So it's important that that you invest in the person as well as them investing in you.
So was that the best advice that you've received, to have these 7 advisors who help guide you on your path? It almost sounds like The Alchemist, one of my, I love that book, that, you know, that the path is created for you and you have these people who come in and help you, guide you on that path.
Yeah, I think the final piece, so they are very important. So I think, you know, that sense of purpose is one of the things I'd really highlight. Having the 7 mentors to guide you on your journey and really help you. And then the final one, I think that I came across while a few years ago, really, which has really stuck in my mind, was it's a very famous Canadian ice hockey player, and I have to say I don't actually follow ice hockey much myself. But I was listening to him giving an interview, and one of the things he said is, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Isn't that like Wayne Gretzky?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
It
No, I
was
love
such a
that quote.
fantastic
Yeah.
moment, and I just thought, that's so true. You really have to take a bit of risk. You have to be willing to fail. You have to try things that perhaps you didn't think were going to come your way. And you know, maybe you don't get the goal, but you're certainly not going to get it if you don't have a go.
That is such great advice. And, you know, I think for me, sometimes I sit back and I'm like, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yes.
And that's probably, you know, I wonder sometimes if I'm being like reckless when I think that. But, you know, of all of the times that I've been like, you know what, what's the worst thing that could happen? And obviously, you know, you're not committing crimes, you're not doing anything like completely reckless. But if you actually take a chance, it could have amazing benefits. And as you were saying earlier, it's not about so much, you know, it's not zero sum. You know, if you fail, you will learn something. And that is invaluable. I mean, you know, some of the best lessons that I've had have been through failures. And these are the kinds of things that you don't learn at Harvard.
No, absolutely. And I always think, you know, take a time to reflect later and have a laugh. I remember, you know, wanting to take on this new industry area, and nanotechnology at the time was absolutely the thing. And I thought, yeah, I can do that. And so we, you know, my team and I, we went out and we started talking to companies about nanotechnology. And one of my team came back and she goes, I scored this amazing meeting. You know, we're going to go and meet with these the head of this nanotechnology at one of the big life sciences companies. And this is great. This is great. You know, and I went over, we flew over to London at the time, and the two of us went into this meeting. We had our kind of little 2 pages of pitch that we were going to talk about. And the 2 people met us and they led us into this boardroom. And then, you know, all these other people started coming into the boardroom as well. Like, oh, who are these people? And then it was like Professor this and Doctor that. And soon there were like 10 people in this boardroom, all with very illustrious technical titles in nanotech. And we sat down and I thought, gosh, this is going to be really scary now. And then they said, hang on a minute. We've got we've got Singapore and the US dialing in for this call, and we're bringing in some people from Zurich. And, you know, by the end of it, there was this wall of experts on the video screen. And my colleague was just looking at me and she just laughed and she said, I'll take the notes. And so she just left me there. And I honestly, to this day, I remember that incredible sinking feeling of thinking, did I ever think this was a good idea? Why did I ever think I was going to go after this and try and, you know, make something out of this new area of focus? but it's now later you can laugh at it. I have to tell you that hour was not good, because my 2 pages sort of ran out after about the first 7 minutes, and they were going, so, that's a really interesting development. Is that, would that be down to the, 1.5 nanometer, or do you think it could go a bit smaller? And I'd be like, great question, I'll have to get back to you on that one.
I'm gonna let her write that down.
Exactly. So I bet, those are times, as you say, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen, is maybe occasionally you make a bit of an idiot of yourself, or you learn to swim while you're sinking. But but you learn from that too. And I have to tell you, the next time I did that, I was a lot better prepared.
But I find in those circumstances when one of my favorite writers, Malcolm Gladwell, gave a speech at BlackBerry, and he was just talking about, listen, he's not going to talk about anything technical because he's in front of a room full of technical experts. So that's not what he's going to talk about. And he talked about other things, about psychology, about how people think. He talked about what he knew. And I think in that situation, I would have gone through my 7 minutes and then started asking them questions. So where do you see this going, and how can we support?
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just like, oh my God. Because I can imagine, like, there would have been 2 things happening. I would have been standing in a pool of my own sweat, and there would have been a me-shaped hole in the wall from where I escaped.
Exactly. So I think as you get more practice, you do what you do. You change the conversation, you learn to switch it around. I was just too young at that point, and but I reflect. Next time it's like, well, I've already done the worst, so when I do it again, it can't be any worse than that one. So let's try again. Maybe it will get better.
Yeah, there you go. And back to what's the worst that can happen. I often, because my background is in technology, I often challenge my team to attempt to break the technology, because I find that people are generally so scared of tech that they are like, oh, I can't do this and I can't do that because I might break it. I was like, break it. I dare you. I challenge you. You've failed if you've not broken something. And that way it kind of removes that apprehension, because at some point you're gonna have to break something. I think the only sort of prohibition is never press delete all.
Yes, exactly. So, but no, I think those are really good lessons, and that resilience is something that you build over time, and it only comes from being able to really take a few risks and learn from them. So I think again, just encourage a lot of women out there who are looking at their careers to really be willing to take those risks. And know that, like the rest of us, if you think about the worst that can happen, it's probably not going to it's not going to be something that's going to destroy the world around you. So get on and give it a go.
I love it. So get on and give it a go. Find your advisors and be clear on your purpose as the 3 things that can help you to really hone in on a fun, adventurous career. Nicola, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I've really appreciated the conversation. It's interesting how, and I think maybe if I were to ask you one last question, because I find it in myself, and I wonder if for you, the sort of further I get in my career, the more somewhat risk averse I get, because the more I have to lose at that point. But I wonder if it isn't that the more you have to gain. Like how do you feel? Like, do you feel as though you're getting more or less risk averse as you get further into your career? How is that manifesting for you?
Look, it's really interesting. I think I'm at this fascinating point now in my career where I'm starting to think. I'm in this sort of transition point where all my career I've been thinking about, how do I keep building? How do I keep learning? How do I keep moving up and forward and onwards? And now I'm at this point of thinking, what else is there out there? What have I been missing in the periphery vision along the way, perhaps? And so I'm certainly not getting more risk averse. I'm perhaps getting a greater appetite for risk.
Really?
But in different ways. I want to sort of broaden myself in new ways, maybe ways that are more about reflecting me as a person a little bit more. And I think one of my struggles in all of this is, and maybe other women will relate to this, is you get to a point where you have to keep asking yourself, is the only thing I want to do is to keep becoming more and more senior? Or actually, at some point, do I want to go back to purpose again and think about how I could use the skills that I get in different ways? And that is quite confronting for those of us who've been very strong career oriented. So for me, the risk taking now is not just about trying new, more senior roles. It's actually now about thinking about what else could I do with the skill set that I have? Could I take on board roles? Could I take on more charity work? Could I lean into some other areas that would also contribute to my purpose in a way that's not in my traditional career path? And might that open some new doors for learning and development as well? So,
and mentoring others and bringing them on that journey.
Yeah, I think I'm feeling actually quite liberated at this point, and I always remember that famous poem, when I turn 40, I'm going to wear purple, and I'm feeling that kind of sense of liberation now, and that sense of being willing to put a little bit more at risk because I feel that I've got a strong foundation and a good resilience from which to do that.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicola. You know what's funny? I don't know that poem. I'm going to find it. When I turn 40, I'm going to wear purple.
Absolutely. Okay.
Right, so thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Getting to the Top, where we learned about how you craft an amazing career, just finding your purpose and figuring out the direction in which you're moving and seizing the opportunities while building that cohort of advisors who can help to guide you on that path so that you have a sounding board and you're not going through this journey on your own. I'm intensely grateful for you spending this time with us today, and to Nicola for sharing these amazing stories with us. I've certainly learned a lot in this conversation, and I hope that you have too. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, and see you next time.